Hey YouTube, how you going? This is Billyeatworld, and today we're going to have a look at the Battlefield 4 exclusive beta. Now the BF4 exclusive beta released today. I believe this is only available to people who have pre-ordered a digital deluxe copy of BF4, to Battlefield 3 premium members, and to Medal of Honor Warfighter Deluxe Edition owners. Unfortunately for everyone else, the BF4 beta will be available on October 4th. There was quite some anticipation leading up to release tonight, but unfortunately for myself and for many other players in Australia and New Zealand, we weren't very well updated by DICE on exactly what time it was going to release. It wasn't until about 1 o'clock in the morning that I actually got my first game in, and it's now 3:30 and I'm putting in the hard yards to get out this video for you guys. Now the good news is I'm playing this on PS3. Judging by what I've heard, a lot of PC users have had quite a few problems. Big delay times trying to get into servers and lots of lag once you get in there. Fortunately, I didn't seem to have any of these issues. Pretty much just jumped straight into a match, and from there on out, it was nice and smooth gameplay. This round that we're currently looking at is a domination round on Siege of Shanghai. It was actually the first domination round I'd played. I'd actually played 2 conquest rounds before this, and to be honest, at this point I wasn't very impressed at all. I feel like the conquest mode probably needs a little bit more polish, but the domination mode is pretty satisfying, and I think by the end of this round I'd racked up a KD of almost 2-1, which I didn't think was too bad considering I was still getting used to the game. The first thing you'll notice about Battlefield 4 is that it's very similar to Battlefield 3. There are some subtle changes in controls, and it does feel slightly different, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same sort of game. One of the most welcome changes, I think, was the fact that they've changed the spot button to one of the right triggers. For anyone out there that's tried to play Battlefield 3 on PS3 will know what I mean when I say spotting on the select button is actually really hard to do. On Xbox 360 you can sort of get away with it because the controller's a little bit bigger, but the PS3 controller's really cramped, and it's just hard to get your finger over there. You find yourself throwing grenades left, right and centre without realising. Another really key change to movement is the fact that now you can peek around corners. I don't understand why this hasn't been in Battlefield games earlier. Most cover-based shooters these days have something like this, and it's nice to see it finally come to Battlefield. I'm a little bit undecided as to how I feel about how Battlefield 4 treats recoil. BF3 had really profound recoil compared to, say, games like Call of Duty. And I feel like at least from this beta, the Battlefield 4 is going to be somewhere in between. It's not so controllable that it makes it easy to play, but it's more controllable than Battlefield 3, that's for sure. Another thing that's been talked about quite a lot in the community lately is the fact that the suppression mechanic has been greatly reduced. So much so that I think if I actually went up against light machine gunners, I probably didn't realise it. It doesn't really seem like suppression affects you much at all anymore. And to be honest, even speaking as someone who plays a lot of recon, I think it's a bit of a shame. I think a lot of recon players will also be happy to know that scope glint probably isn't quite as bad as it was in Battlefield 3. And the same goes for the glare off laser sights. The only drawback I can see though is that I wasn't really getting blinded at all by laser sights, and that was something that I used to use in close quarters all of the time. I think a lot of people will argue that a lot of the changes to Battlefield 4 are going to make this game more of an arcade shooter. But an interesting new feature that makes the game a little bit more tactical is that if you reload with rounds still in your magazine, you'll lose those rounds. This is going to make the support class such an important class because you run out of ammo really quickly. It's surprisingly difficult to try and train yourself not to hit the reload button when you normally would, and it's also forcing you to try and take out enemies with less bullets. Now in terms of how the weapons play, in this clip I'm using the AK-12, which I thought was a really good all-round weapon. It seemed to have a decent enough fire rate to take out close quarters opponents, but it was accurate enough to take out mid-range targets with a little bit of burst fire. Unfortunately for you support guys out there, light machine guns are just as inaccurate as ever, and being that suppression isn't really an issue anymore, it'll be interesting to see how these weapons actually turn out. I did get a chance to take out a few guys with PDWs and with sniper rifles, but I've got to say, they're pretty much identical to how they are in Battlefield 3. I'm very keen to try out the DMR with some of the other classes other than just the recon class. I was a big fan of DMRs in Battlefield 3, and I think they can be really powerful in most situations. I think it's interesting though that recon players aren't necessarily going to have the advantage they used to have in that every class can take DMRs now. It's sort of hard to judge when and where to use these weapons with just the one map to try out at the moment, but knowing DICE, we're going to have a lot of different maps to deal with and a lot of different situations to get ourselves into, so I'm sure everything's going to have its own place eventually. I'm mainly an infantry player, so I haven't had a lot of time to have a look at vehicles yet, but what I can say is that I had a little bit of a spin in a tank and was really happy to find that the control scheme is sort of going towards the Halo style of tank control, where the tank is being controlled by the control stick rather than one of the trigger buttons. I think this is going to make it so much easier to maneuver vehicles, and I feel like anything they can do in this respect would be a good thing. The vehicle controls in Battlefield 3 were just a little bit clunky for my liking. One thing I really like is the new deploy system that actually has the map on screen. There's an auto deploy function where you can just set it to deploy and change your loadout while you're waiting. It might only save you a few seconds to do this, but at the end of the day, a few seconds in Battlefield can actually be a long time. I must admit, one thing I'm missing is the clutching hand when you die. I'm not a fan of the new kill cam at all. The painted red killer is just a bit too much for me. It doesn't really seem realistic at all, and I think the Battlefield 3 kill cam was much better. Another thing I'm going to miss is the blue text when you kill an enemy player. It's been replaced by a somewhat bland red and white dialogue, which I feel like blends into the background most of the time, and it's just not as satisfying. It might not seem like a big thing, but I feel like text like this, you know, even the size and the shape of the hit marker can have a really big, profound effect on how you enjoy a game. I think at least it should be easy to see, and unfortunately at the moment it's not. Another nice change in regard to this is that you actually now get kills recorded when you assist someone else in killing an enemy. I actually got a 99 kill assist in this round, and I'm glad to see that finally counts for something. Now, I think with any beta or pre-release, you're not going to have a final finished polished product to look at. Unfortunately, there are some bland textures in this beta. To be honest, I don't think it's actually going to look anything like this in the final release, or at least I hope not, because if there is, there's going to be a lot of really disappointed pre-order customers out there. Frankly, it just looks bad. Well, the PS3 version does at least. As to be expected, there's also quite a few glitches. At one point I smashed a window and I couldn't walk through it. There was another instance where I was trying to reload and jumped over a fence at the same time and the reload animation just stopped. In one of the Conquest rounds, as the skyscraper was collapsing, I tried to jump off and I was in mid-air but unfortunately still died. Not sure what happened there. And at one point I was actually run over in the lobby of the skyscraper by a truck. In any case, it didn't really take too much away from the core Battlefield 4 mechanics. And even if this is an unpolished beta release, it's just nice to experience this a little bit ahead of time. Anyway guys, thanks heaps for watching. I'll be back in the next week with some more BF4 videos. If you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button and enjoy the rest of the gameplay.
Have just neutralized objective Charlie.